Welcome. Welcome. You are listening to audio from the table. If you'd like to learn more about our community or donate to this ministry, please visit thetabletx.com.
Grace and peace, Table Podcast listeners. Brett here. Glad to be with you all. So we are currently in our series titled Grounded, the Ethics of Jesus in a Shaky World. And the premise is basically that as religious engagement kind of fades in our culture, a kind of loss of clarity sets in. We just, we aren't so sure about God anymore. We aren't so sure what the good looks like, or we're not really sure what a good life is actually all about. We start to lose a sense of a kind of shared moral order, and then resort to highly individualistic visions of life success. Usually the default in our culture seems to center on career and money making, though, as we'll go into in this series, or really specifically this sermon, I should say, we do kind of expand beyond that. But there's kind of signs of this decline all around us, from politicians and leaders who are like unashamedly corrupt, to young people who equate a good life with being famous, to churches more interested in numerical growth or political power than the character and Christ-likeness of their members. So in this series, we're basically saying, let's not be that. Like, let's take our living and our ethics seriously. Let's think deeply about what a good life looks like. Let's reflect on the person, the teachings of Jesus Christ, and be guided towards his vision of God and the good that he kind of put before us. So that's what this series is all about. And with that in mind, the title of my message today is Undoing My Hero System. So Ernest Becker, in his book, The Denial of Death, named that humans are profoundly aware of our own mortality, and that to cope, we all, and I do mean all, every individual, community, nation state, culture, constructs what he called hero systems. So these are cultural scripts that promise us cosmic meaning, significance, and the sense that who we are and what we do matters beyond our physical death. Now, Becker was writing many decades ago. So more recently, the psychologist and Christian writer Richard Beck, who I often quote from, I read his blog daily and have read many of his books. I highly suggest him to you all. And he's done a great job of putting Ernest Becker in conversation with Christian thought and ethics and contemporary culture. His book, The Shape of Joy, which came out, I think, in the last year or so. I'm reading that now, and he covers some of this content. He also has a few blog posts where he covers this. So here's some kind of examples that Beck offers of like dominant kind of cultural hero scripts in America today that promise us a certain significance and meaning and a kind of symbolic immortality. So here's some American hero systems. First, there's the American dream, right? Work hard, accumulate wealth, build something that outlasts you. This could be a business or kind of a legacy, or maybe a famous family name that's known all over town or something for the success associated with it. Nationalism and military service. So dying for your country is kind of framed as like the ultimate heroic act, right? Transcending individual death through collective glory. Celebrity and fame, being known by millions, is a kind of secular form of immortality. Politics, right? Especially in a post-Christian culture, I think politics has overtaken religion as the primary hero system, the kind of arena where making a difference is now kind of pursued. Productivity and career achievement, as I kind of indicated earlier. So titles, promotions, LinkedIn legacies, right, all serve as a kind of proof that like your life mattered. Parenting and family legacy. So cultivating a family that spans, 3 generations becomes a kind of monument to human life and value. And in essence, cultural hero systems then lead, as I kind of start to choose, right, my own personal hero game. This is in essence the path that I've opted for to find self-esteem in a very shaky world. However, what Ernest Becker goes on to point out is that because we live in a pluralistic culture, our hero games become a source of conflict. For not everyone agrees that like, yes, this hero system as opposed to that hero system, that's, the best. They become rivals to one another, competing with one another for people's attention and allegiance. And because of this, it's very easy to start to feel a bit threatened when someone calls into question our hero game. It gives us anxiety because these beliefs and values are precisely how we make our life meaningful. Right? This is how I get a sense of self-esteem. And so don't you dare call into question my hero game. I'm literally staking the meaning of my life on it. So that leads us to our scripture today. And what I want you to do, this is from Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 24. I want you to listen closely for the hero game going on here. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down asked a favor of him. "What is it you want?" he asked. She said, "Grant that one of these two sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom." All right, so just to pause for a second. So the scenario here is you have the two kind of young disciples, their mom. Why is their mother coming to do this on their behalf? I don't know. Okay, but she's there and she's kind of trying to get kind of favor for them, right? I mean, the positions of the right and the left, these are like positions of authority and power. So then Jesus responds in verse 22, "You don't know what you are asking," Jesus said to them. "Can you drink the cup I am going to drink?" I think this is an allusion here to the cup of suffering, right? The Lord's table, my blood poured out for you. And he's kind of thinking of the cross here. So when he's saying, my sons want to be at your right and left, it's a kind of like, I don't think you know where I'm headed, Jesus is saying. Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? "We can," they answered. Like, "We're ready." Jesus said to them, "Well, you will indeed drink from my cup." And in other words, I think he's saying, like, you're going to suffer. I mean, we know pretty much all of the disciples died like martyrs' deaths at some point. So he says, "You will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left, that's not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they've been prepared by my Father." When the 10 heard about this, so that's the 10 like other disciples, they were indignant with the two brothers. So here's kind of the great irony. You may think, so it's simple. We just trade out those more secular hero games for a Christian one, right? Or a religious one, a spiritual one. But what this passage shows is just because we, get saved, so to speak, doesn't yet mean we've actually surrendered our hero game to God. It just means that it takes on a new form. So we might call this our Christian hero system. Well, what is that? So it's a dominant Christian cultural script for how one derives meaning and self-esteem in a Christian religious context. So what are some Christian hero systems? Well, there's martyrdom and sainthood, right? Dying for the faith is the supreme heroic act, guaranteeing cosmic significance. If you're familiar with church history, there's definitely been seasons in the life of the church, especially early on, where people yearned for martyrdom, even to the point where bishops and folks had to say okay, wait, stop. We don't need a death wish here. This is, people were really going over the top with it. So even though it may sound strange to modern ears, this is totally a thing. Another Christian hero system, missions and church planting. This obviously kind of hits close to home for me, but someone might say I'm not focused on that, that secular money making. Oh, no. I'm for the higher ideals of life in the faith. I'm devoting my life to missions or ministry or church planning or whatever. That's what it's going to be for me. And then, of course, sneakily, we get very focused on external metrics in those worlds of missions or church planning to kind of prove our significance and effectiveness, because it's still a hero game. I still want to win at this, church planting game. Oh, I could tell you stories of how I've been through this and I can't say I have learned. I am learning. I'm in the process of slowly sort of unwinding my ego from my own Christian church planting hero game. It's a slow death in a lot of ways, though. It really holds on. Another one, Christian hero system, is pastoral celebrity and hierarchy. I've told this story a few years ago, but the former leader of the Church of England, Rowan Williams, he said, you can always tell the church is in trouble when the clergy are overly concerned about the color of their buttons. And he was referring to the practice in the Anglican Church where certain rankings of priests basically get like certain colored buttons. So ordinary priests and deacons, they get black buttons. Canon priests and deans and archdeacons, they get red buttons. And then finally, like bishops and archbishops, they get a full upgrade. Their whole robe changes to purple with, as you guessed, purple buttons. And now this may sound kind of ridiculous. Who cares about buttons? Well, here's the thing. It's really hard to climb that hierarchy, right? So it may not sound like much to you, but if you're in that world, if you're in that hero system, woo, babies, it matters. I mean, you walk into the room as a bishop or an archbishop in that those purple buttons, and the room comes to a hush. Those buttons mean everything. And people spend their lives reaching for that next level of freaking buttons. Like, well, what is that? That's a Christian clergy hero system. Or what about theological correctness? I think this is a hero game some Christians like to play. Just go on the internet and you will find, whole websites, like people devoting every spare second of their time to like pointing out others' theological flaws, at least as they perceive them. They kind of envision themselves like, I'm a guardian of orthodoxy. And this becomes a kind of heroic identity. I and I alone, or I and my tribe alone, were the only ones preserving the true faith. We're the passionate defenders of the authentic Orthodox Christian way. What's going on there? It's another hero game. Or moral purity culture, kind of a performing of holiness as a way to stand out in God's and others' eyes and earn divine favor. I think that in a lot of ways, that could be kind of the Achilles heel of this series, is you become kind of too self-conscious about your own ethics and goodness. It's kind of like trying to become humble. And there's a kind of paradox there where it's like you can't really try, so to speak. Like the more self-consciously aware you are of your own humility, the less humble you are. And it kind of in a similar way, like, oh, I'm super ethical. I'm a super moral person. Like, I'm very good. I'm a very good person. And this becomes like, oh, this is kind of a weird, like you can turn it into another hero game. It just becomes, it's another way for the ego to kind of masquerade. Right. And there's many others I could go on to list for the sake of time. I won't, but each wing of the church has like their own hero systems and such. But here again, I think Jesus just cuts right to the heart of the matter, calling the entire hero system, religious and secular, all of it into question. Continuing our story from earlier, verse 25, Jesus called them together. So this is the 12 disciples. And he said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Another place will say, whoever wants to be first must become last. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. See, one of the key problems with the entire hero system complex in both its secular and religious forms, aside from the fact that it brings us into conflict with one another as we kind of compete and call into question each other's hero games and all that. But aside from that, the problem is that it still all centers around me. It's me. It's my ego, kind of almost masquerading as a kind of selflessness, because even in the quote unquote selfless hero games, who's it still kind of all about, So you have maybe a pastor or someone in ministry. Oh, it's just all about others, until those people aren't so grateful. And then you freak out, why? Well, because it really wasn't just all about others. I think a great example of this is an amazing TV show. It's kind of a little dated now, but Breaking Bad. That was, of course, written and produced by Vince Gilligan. And as you probably know the story, but it's basically a high school chemistry teacher named in the story Walter White, who played by Bryan Cranston. But he basically finds out that he has a life-ending illness. And so he turns, takes his chemistry knowledge, and he turns to cooking and then eventually dealing meth in order to make money to provide for his family in his last days. He's trying to kind of build up a nest egg. Now, the trick is, as the show goes on, well, he breaks bad. It kind of goes from, bad to worse. And it becomes increasingly clear that what he kind of claimed was a kind of altruism. Throughout the show, he's always trying to convince his wife, Skylar is her name, like, I'm doing this for the family. It's for the family. But a few seasons in, he kind of has this moment of truth where he just finally confesses to Skylar. He just says, look, I did it for me. I did it for me, Skylar. I liked it. I was good at it. I did it for me. I think similarly, we often get into religious or artistic or charity or political, hero games, and we want to say it's all about them. It's all about the movement. It's all about others. But like the disciples in Jesus, he kind of, the way he called them into question, where we want to say it's all about the kingdom, but actually we're doing it for us. And usually I think about the best we can imagine is, reframing our hero game, where we go from a kind of selfish hero game to what we imagine to be a less selfish one. But again, only to realize that actually we are often as selfish as ever. And I think that's what Jesus is getting at here, is a total deframing of ourselves, not just a reframing. The gentleman I quoted last week, Adyashanti, he talks some about this. He says what we need is not just a reframing of ourselves, a new story, a new hero game, but we actually need a deframing. In other words, this move to the servant of all, it's supposed to be a picture of the loss of the ego, right? Because of course, if you intentionally set out to become the servant of all, like I'm going to be the freaking greatest servant of all there ever was, it's still a hero game, right? So the heart of this is not, Jesus is not offering us like the highest hero game that ever existed, becoming the servant of all. No, the heart of what he's getting at is not to become the best servant of all as compared to all those other poor saps who aren't very good servants. Rather, it's to finally come to the point where we just say, oh God, I surrender my entire freaking hero game, the whole dang thing, my whole identity, my whole story, everything, not my will, but yours be done. That's the moment. And what is it? This is the cross. Right? The loss of the self, the death of the ego, the death of my hero game. And that may sound very negative indeed. Who would I be without my hero game? I'll wither away to nothingness. No, you'll finally be free, right? Free to become the servant of all. This is resurrection. You're reborn, right? I mean, Jesus said this, you must be born again. That's not just walking, an aisle in the church and saying, I choose Jesus. Though that may be a first step for some. Like it's the beginning of the process, right? Because of course it's much easier to attend church than to let go of our hero game. Which is why Jesus said, narrow is the path and few find it. I don't think he was just talking about like going to heaven. I think he's talking about this path, the actual following him, discipleship to Jesus, right? It's this loss of the hero game. Even in the church, though, few find it. You see, as we release our hero game, we start to relax into a place of surrender, contentment, and wholeness. From this state of being, a desire to serve and uplift others, right? To become the servant of all, it starts to arise naturally. I think this, in many ways, is really the pinnacle of the Christian life, of the ethical life. It's this place of surrendering the hero game, becoming, as a side effect, the servant of all. I'll close with this story. Giovanni Bernardone was a man born in Italy in 1181 to a wealthy cloth merchant. And because of this, at least for his time and kind of age, he was living the dream, carefree, privileged, rich. He loved music, and like many young men, he had a kind of idealism about like war and knighthood that eventually led him to join a kind of local war that was going on, where he fought and eventually became a prisoner. Now, because he was a noble, after a year in prison, he was released. But still, that left him enough time that he began to kind of question his life up to that point. Like all the heroism and the visions like battle and winning and kind of pleasure and fun and all that he'd been pursuing. He started to devote more time to prayer, to solitude, continuing to kind of contemplate the life he led up to that point. And one day, while praying in a dilapidated church there in Italy, he had a vision where Christ, from the church's crucifix, spoke to him and said, "Giovanni, go and repair my church, which, as you see, is falling into ruins." Now, in that moment, he took this quite literally, thinking like, oh, Christ means like this literal church I am within. So he sold his possessions, even sold some of his father's own cloth, which kind of we'll play into the story in a bit, to fund the church's repair. And his father finds out about this and goes into an absolute rage. I mean, he was already like anxious about his son's recent religious turn in life and the way he was becoming increasingly unlikely to follow in the family business. But like this, selling the cloth, selling everything he has, rebuilding a random church, like it was a step too far. So it led to this quite dramatic scene where his father, Pietro, drags Giovanni before the local bishop to publicly shame him for the loss of the cloth. And they arrive. The father kind of makes his appeal to the bishop, explaining all that his, foolish son has done. And then Giovanni is asked, what does he have to say for himself? And at first he doesn't say anything. Instead, he starts to just strip off his clothes, shedding his family's famous cloth. And with it, kind of everything. His family name, his inheritance, his identity. Until there he stands. Now, at this point, some tellings of the story have it like in two different ways. Some tellings of the story, he stands there in his undies. Other versions of the story, he's completely naked. And he's just standing there in the church. And then he says this, "Until this day, I called Pietro Bernardone my father. But from now on, I can truly say, our Father who art in heaven." And from that day on, it was a complete turning point. He lived in poverty. He wore only a coarse tunic. He went on to form a small brotherhood that lived in total simplicity, caring for lepers and other unwanted people. And that community went on to become known today as the Franciscans. And this, of course, is the origin story of the famous Saint Francis of Assisi. And what strikes me about his story for kind of our purposes today is that moment of stripping. Right? It's this picture of removal. He didn't trade one hero game for another. No, instead, like Christ, he emptied himself, abandoning all hero games. And if you know a little church history, the Franciscans have done so much good to repair the church, which is constantly in ruins because of our own hero games. So you see, when Christ invites us to become the servant of all, it's not a new hero game. No, it's an invitation to the end of all of them. So in closing, I want you to kind of reflect on this and ask yourself this question. Who would I be without my hero game? Who would I be without this? Like my identity, or at least my so-called identity, my story, my beliefs, opinions, complaints, judgments, histories, ideals, dreams, goals. Who would I be without those things? And really only then will we actually be free to become the servant of all. May we have the strength for that level of surrender. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.